So welcome everyone to the VEF Virtual Series. For those who are joining for the first time, the VEF Virtual Series, guided by the theme Accelerating the Energy Transition, is a sequence of online consultations that explore the pathways that stimulate demand and promote economic recovery in 3 end-use sectors. So this is the 5th session of our food systems track, and we will be covering energy management in agro-industries. So before we begin, I would like to draw your attention to our networking station. I don't know if you're seeing this is the right or the left. So to the left at the bottom, there is a green icon that says networking. This will be open from 3:30 to 3:45. And it's an excellent opportunity for you to interact with the pool of participants in today's session. So don't miss out on that. And to break the ice, we would like to start with a quick interactive poll. So on the right side of your screen, there is a tab called Slido. It's right next to the People's tab. And if you click in there, you will see a question and a box to type an answer. So we will give you around an hour for you to send in your answer. And then we will regroup after the breakout room discussions to take a look at the results. So the question for our poll is, what is the #1 action required to unlock the potential of energy in agribusiness? If you missed it, if you didn't hear me correctly, don't worry. Again, just click on the Slido tab to the right of your screen, and you can type your answer in there. So now, to get started, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Jean Teixeira. He's the Director of the Department of Agriculture here at UNIDO. So we're just letting him in the platform. Hello, Mr. Teixeira. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you. Thank you.
Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues. On behalf of my colleagues in UNIDO and our VEF partners, I'm very much pleased to welcome you to this 5th session of the Food Systems Workshop, which focuses on the opportunities of sustainable energy interventions in agribusiness. As you all know, by 2050, the global population will reach nearly 10 billion people, which calls for a need to increase food production by at least 70%. So the food systems must also change in a sustainable way to respond to the reality of climate change. The current energy consumption in agri-food systems are unsustainable. The food industry is currently consuming about 30% of the world's available energy, with more than 70% occurring beyond the farm gate. That's in a post-harvest scenario, and produce over 20% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. This doesn't include the land use change globally. However, innovations in energy and food systems are rapidly providing new opportunities for saving energy and generating from renewable sources and strengthening local food systems. Today's virtual consultation will be discussing, I was told, the role of energy and sustainability in agribusinesses, which I believe will contribute to global call for joint actions that tries to bridge the SDG 2, that is zero hunger, and SDG 9, that is clean energy for all. And also the issue of reducing and eliminating hunger by transforming the nature of the global food system to one that is not only sustainable, but also regenerative. In UNIDO here, we place an emphasis on sustainability of food system transformation, that is an agribusiness development, which uses a clean and renewable energy whenever is possible. Bioenergy, for example, could be more widely used in food industries for both electricity generation and thermal applications, and help improve resource efficiency in food systems. And also decentralized renewable resources are other opportunities for rural agribusinesses where our focus mostly goes. During today's session, my colleagues and you will be exploring solutions for common challenges and also identify opportunities that are preventing the progress in making our food systems more sustainable and using clean and affordable energy. I am very confident that the discussion here today will help us deliver recommendations to keep us on track with our development agenda and the climate targets. Thank you, and I wish you wonderful and productive discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Teixeira. I would now like to continue with the program, and we'll be giving the floor to Mr. Ali Badarneh. He's the Chief of Sustainable Food Systems Division in the Department of Agriculture at UNIDO. So we're letting him in the platform.
Thank you, Anna.
Ali, thank you. Thank you for joining.
Thanks a lot for the support. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening for all of you. And let me join Dejane in welcoming you. And also thank you for the time and participating in this session, which is very close to our hearts and very important to our agenda. Now, before I think we introduce the scene setting for this session, let me just reconfirm with you the key objectives of the session, as you've seen hopefully in the discussion paper we shared with you earlier. I think today with your support, we should be able to collect the needs and critical issues preventing the progress on the ground. We hopefully also will be able, together with you, identify the key areas and solutions that can help in advancing action on the ground in high-impact countries. And as I'm mentioning high-impact countries, so I hope most of you, if not all, have also reviewed the discussion paper, which also provide a good description on the main issues and the methodology, as well as the criteria that will help us to identify the key countries where progress can be made and also where impact can be realized. But I'm sure the moderators will also help you and us in steering the discussion around these key topics as outlined in the discussion paper. Let me also confirm that the outcomes of this session will help UNIDO and you as our partners to launch a global program that will drive high priority actions on the ground. And we will also compile all these discussions and conclusions for producing key policy briefs for key events that are planned in 2021. So just to conclude, your inputs and recommendations and experience will feed into a series of events after this session, so we're not going to stop at this session. So once again, we thank you for this. And I think we can now introduce the scene setting session. And I think as this title is about agro-industries, so we thought the best to tell us about their experience is the industry itself. And with this, I would like to introduce Ms. Salma Shaker, the CSR and Sustainability Manager at the Juhayna Company in Egypt, a major national company. And I think they will share with us the experience, motivation, and results of integrating sustainable energy in their food production. So with this, I leave you with Ms. Salma to take us through her experience. Thank you so much.
Hello all. I'm so happy to be part of this forum today, and I'd gladly share with you and talk to you about Juhayna Manufacturing Company and share with you all the challenges and all the projects that we've been supported by the UNIDO. Let me start. Can you all see the presentation? Okay. Juhayna is a food manufacturing company that are specialized mainly in dairy, juice, and cooking products. We started our first manufacturing production line in 1987, and we started with one brand of milk and one brand of yogurt and one brand of juice. And then we expanded, and now we have more than 200 SKUs. And that's our range. This year, we just launched our fourth category, which is the plant-based category. We have 5 different flavors: almonds, oats, coconut, soy, and hazelnut, which makes us the first Egyptian company to produce plant-based milk, UHT. When we thought of having this line, we thought of three things. The key driver of consumers, why are they thinking, why are they looking for plant-based products? We came up with three main reasons: health reasons, that different people want to reduce their dairy consumption, they're concerned about their weight, or they're lactose intolerant and they want to shift for any alternative. The second and another very important reason was the environmental reason, because plant-based products are environmental friendly, and ethical reasons, because a lot of people, and there's a trend in Egypt here that a lot of people are moving or shifting to vegan. That's about Johaina. We have now 4 operating factories, more than 200 SKUs. We have 38 distribution centers across Cairo and the other governorates. We have more than 1,000 vans and trucks, and we have our own farm that consists of 7,000 livestock, and we produce 9 million packs per day, every day. Regarding our sustainable journey, how did we start, and why did we think of sustainability, and when did we issue our first sustainability report? Back in 2016, we've been aligning our operations with environmental, social, and governmental frameworks. And we started adopting a new principle, which is creating shared value. Creating shared value that falls under 5 main pillars. The 5 main pillars are focused on different initiatives regarding industry, regarding health, sports, our human capital, and also environmental actions. And since then, we started forming strategic collaborations, and we joined the UN Global Compact, and we became a participant. And then we started looking into the SDGs and how can we align our efforts with the SDGs. There's something with the connection. Okay. And then we took a step further, and we thought now it's time to publish our first sustainability report, which reports on the period from 2016 to 2018. You can check our sustainability report, it's on our website. And this report allowed us to make necessary strategic adjustments. Since then, we started forming committees from different people championing the sustainability report, make sure we have a sustainability champion in each department where we can collect and gather and discuss the data we have. We applied the energy efficiency programs with the UNIDO, and we started calculating our carbon emissions. And we're going to issue our first carbon footprint report this year, the second quarter. And for sustainability report 2019-2020, it's going to be published on March this March. Okay, the energy regarding the energy projects implemented with the UNIDO, we had 3 main projects. We had implemented 1 main project, which is the energy management system that was applied in our 4 factories. The first one was EG Food. EG Food is our chilled yogurt factory. We always look at the projects that have no cost, low cost project, and we started with having a compressed air system project through energy management system. As for the Marwa and Dawlaya, Marwa is our concentrate company, and Dawlaya is our juice company. We started having sub-meters. Also, it's an energy management system which helped us a lot in the optimization of Dawlaya and the Marwa. We had a lot of training sessions, best practices, a lot of trainings and workshops and support from the UNIDO, and it made a lot of savings. Also, last year, the UNIDO supported us with technical trainings for the installation of solar water heaters across our 4 factories as well. There was an expected potential cost savings in the 4 factories with a total of 817 and 825 pounds, but it's still under discussion with the management to them. But due to the coronavirus, we had a lot of budget cuts, and that's why we're still in the process of looking into this project. For the savings of last year's, we had different projects and different energy savings, which we saved a total of 12 million pounds last year. And for our challenge, our main challenge was the coronavirus last year, that we had to reduce the working hours, which led that we consume more energy, yet we have less production, and that was the main challenge for us. And the budget cuts. The coronavirus led to a lot of budget cuts in our industry, and that affected a lot of trainings, completing the management system in the different factories. We already had it in 3, missing 1. A lot of projects turning from LED to for the 4 factories. As for the future plans, we're looking that all our factories by 2022 are expected to have full transition to the LED lighting. As I told you, because of the corona, we had a lot of budget cuts, and we have applied solar shades in some of our factories. We will install another one in EG Food, and that's it.
Thank you, Salma. Thank you for such an interesting presentation. I think it's a very good introduction to the discussions that we will have in a second. So I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So before we move into the breakout room sessions, I would like to thank everybody who has already answered our poll in the Slido tab to the right. I would just like to quickly share the results so far. I think they're quite interested, and they can give you, some inspiration for the rest of the discussions. So until now, we see that government policies is one of the biggest words that has been mentioned. We also have finance, sustainability. So please make sure to answer if you haven't. You have until the end of the breakout rooms discussions. So now it is time to go to our breakout rooms. To do that, you can click on the series button to the left, and it's going to give you the 3 different breakout rooms discussions that we have. So to our speakers, you may enter the one that you were assigned to, and to our participants, feel free to virtually walk around and select the one that you are most interested in. Also, please remember that you can ask any question or make a comment using the chat to the right, and then we will regroup back to hear the outcomes of the different discussions. So thank you for joining, and see you in a little bit.
Thank you. Welcome. We have a really rich and diverse set of eminent panelists here, from academe to cutting edge entrepreneurs, and to the UN agencies, including the bank and World Bank and UNIDO. In a second, we'll have another panelist join us. So I think our charge today is to talk about how do we increase the effectiveness of the overall energy management in the agro-industry. How do we reduce costs, improve resilience? And today's session, we need to prioritize key actions for clean energy interventions in the agro-industry. So to kickstart our conversation, the first question at hand is, what are the opportunities for developing low carbon emission pathways for agro-industries, and the role of energy management, bioenergy, solar, thermal electrifications, etc. So I'm going to request Professor Alexander Mathis to give his perspectives first.
Yeah, thank you very much, Deepa. Hello, participants. Hello, panel. Very glad to join today here from Zurich, here at ETH Zurich. So I would like to start a bit, maybe one step behind. So before we can talk about energy saving, energy management, we should understand the system. And for that, we need to have a system understanding and system assessment. At least in the food and agro business where we are working, also with the Swiss food industry, here we focus mainly on sustainability assessment that is strongly linked to the Sustainable Development Goals, which gives already an impression of this multidimensional space where carbon is, for example, one of the very important impact categories, but not the only one. And especially in the agro and food business, we have strong links to other environmental impacts, but also to social dimensions. So here, holistic sustainability assessment in all three dimensions, environment, economy, and social dimension, that would be very helpful. And we can do that when we have the current set of methods available, and here method development is ongoing, and especially also have data available. And then we can quantify the sustainability performance of certain value chains, product or services by different sustainability methods. With that understanding, we can define most impactful potential actions. And here we focus, for example, on the direction alternative to animal-based products, because animal-based value chains are linked to significant amount of methane emissions, which have a significant impact on the carbon dioxide equivalent, for example, in the emissions. And here we can think about land-independent solutions like microalgae systems. We use the majority of our arable land, but we can also think about circular economy solutions. Here we work, for example, on waste utilization by black soldier fly larvae insects to produce more sustainable feed, just to give very few and impactful examples where we target on the actions. Thank you very much.
That was very good. You actually covered a lot of ground in that response. Particularly of interest is this whole circular economy concept that many of us are getting our feet wet. Over to you, William. Same question. Your perspectives and maybe perhaps you use your lens from Power for All to help situate us. William, are you able to hear me?
Deepa, apologies. Yeah, so as you mentioned, so I work for Power for All, and our focus in my comments are sort of focused around the work that we do, which is in rural settings, mostly in Sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia. So just keep that in mind as I talk about ways that we're looking at low carbon emissions. So I think first of all, the opportunity for these types of solutions in rural settings where energy access is not particularly available, I would argue that the role of carbon abatement and reductions is somewhat limited. But that said, there is a large opportunity to create low carbon emission pathways related to smallholder farming by displacing diesel generators used for irrigation, processing, and cold storage. So in Nigeria, for example, you have an estimated 60 million generators, and the government's Energizing Economies initiative there is looking to solarize more than 880,000 shops with and power 300,000 plus micro enterprises, which are largely reliant on diesel generators. So that's one area. I would also say that bioenergy that turns waste into energy is also a large opportunity that does away with burning harvest stubble and other waste biomass, which is a big issue in places like India. You have companies like Husk Power that's been able to design a system that's a hybrid solar biomass that allows for 24/7 clean power mini grids. Other companies like Sistema Bio are turning animal waste into biogas and fertilizer, some of which can be used for cooking. And so if we extend the food systems discussion to cooking, there's also an opportunity for these types of solutions to play a role in reducing emissions, but also reducing indirect impacts through less deforestation. So those would be some of the highlights that I would focus on as a start. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, William. That was fascinating. I think there are a lot of practical applications of this hybrid system that we just talked. I think the catch is how do we how do we deploy this at scale where it is more meaningful in these economies, and it all comes right back to investments and enabling policies, I believe. Over to you, Eric. Having heard from Alexander and from William, what are your thoughts in terms of the opportunities for developing low carbon emission pathways for agro-industries? And perhaps I think with your background from climate science, etc., how do you promote and prioritize those key actions?
Thank you very much, Deepa, and thanks for inviting me. Thanks, Alexander and William, for your points. Alexander, you covered a lot of the things I was going to mention as well. I want to open with the question, why are we even thinking about this? We're thinking about climate change because we want to achieve global equity and we want human and natural well-being. When we think about energy, carbon is a very large part of the picture, but when we think about agriculture, I think the food aspect of agriculture is a much greater part of that picture. Things like soil degradation and restoration are highly important for the natural world, and food security is important for human well-being. So carbon really is just a part of a much, much bigger picture when we talk about agriculture, and we should not look at it in isolation. However, of course, it is an important piece. And if we look at where emissions in the agricultural sector come from, a large part is just animal agriculture, particularly ruminants, and energy. Fertilizer, you could, a bit boldly say fertilizer is equivalent to energy, depending on sort of how you look at it. But if you make green energy, you get green fertilizer. So that's one piece of the solution, and then you're done with that. But from an animal perspective, if we look at the last 10 years of innovation in alternative meats, Impossible Foods, for example, I know some other food scientists, it's just amazing what they've been doing in just a few years in terms of mimicking the taste of meat. And there's a lot going on in this space. I hope that's going to be fruitful. And as Alexander mentioned, something that I suppose many people here, but in the public, are not aware of black soldier flies. It's just a miracle of nature. You can feed waste to something that turns into protein. It's like, how does this work? But that's magic to me. And these things, I think, will accumulate. Innovation is faster than ever in the space, and I really just want to highlight that we want to focus on the cumulative set of goals and values around agriculture and not just on carbon. That's coming from a climate person. So I mean it. We should definitely look at the whole human and natural aspect of agriculture, maybe even more than the carbon aspect, because the carbon aspect is going to be, to a large extent, addressed by simply having green energy, which is an energy problem and not an agriculture problem. And then just maybe eating less beef, guys. Like, let's just not. And then we're good. So yeah, maybe a bit simplified, but in a nutshell, that's where we are.
I loved it. I think, as far as simplicity goes, green energy plus green fertilizer, how much more precise and easy can
I guess that's my job with climate science. We have to pack all that stuff into 5 minutes.
I'm definitely going to steal that in my work, and I'm also a food scientist in my previous life, so I'm very aware of all these new technologies that are out there to mimic animal protein taste. And you're absolutely right. Innovation is moving at such a fast pace, and we're not able to keep up. But as is the degradation of our natural resources, that's also equally happening at a really fast pace. So that is the conundrum, and that's the paradigm that we're all working.
Climate change is just super hyped at the moment. We got to hype everything.
Yes. Well, yeah, I mean, there's so much noise, so I guess the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So with that, I'm going to ask Juliet from the bank, from your energy experience point of view, can you expand on what you've heard and or what your professional experiences are to identify those opportunities for the low carbon emission pathways and how energy management, bioenergy, etc., can play such an important role in the agro-industries.
Sure. Thank you, Deepa. Hi, everyone. I'm Juliette Bénard from SMAP at the World Bank. And I will go back to one aspect of the problem, which is green energy and the utilization of renewable energy sources as a very practical way for farmers to reduce their operating costs, reduce their exposure to energy price fluctuation, given the use of diesel, and also over the longer term build resilience. So I would like to highlight the example of solar water pumping. It is estimated in Africa that about 95% of farmland depends on seasonal rainfall. And solar water pumping has become a pretty mature technology across regions, with many innovative business models which have emerged. And for the farmers, it means economic benefits with a cheaper costs of energy, and of course, environmental benefits as well. This switch, as William said, this switch from diesel-powered equipment to renewable-based equipment is a very complex and long transition that implies reforming and reducing subsidies which support fossil fuels in many countries. Subsidies are currently, in most cases, driving the expansion of very intensive farming model, but reforming subsidies means political will, acceptability, and also one aspect we focus a lot at the bank is about mitigating the financial losses for the most vulnerable farmers. Another technology is about clean cooling solution, as William said as well, with many modular hybrid technology that are emerging. And the pandemic, of course, highlighted the need for reliable access to cold storage, especially for perishable value chains. And cold storage can reduce food waste and improve what we call the field to fork connectivity. One aspect that we haven't mentioned yet is really, and which is really often neglected, is about energy efficiency. Agriculture and the food sector consume about 30% of the global energy, and improving energy efficiency is therefore it's essential to reduce the demand, reduce emission, and ultimately reduce cost as well. So it's a very virtuous circle. It can apply along the agriculture and food value chain, production, processing, I mean, at every step, especially for activities which are relying a lot on fossil fuels. But it requires changes in technology, equipment, and also the way we manage the process and the operations. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Okay, that gets into some specific examples of some of the interventions that you've been promoting, as well as what the barriers, adoption barriers that are prevalent as well. So that's that we are actually getting to the meat of the discussion. And I see there's a lot of very interesting chat that is going on as well. So I'm going to quickly transfer this question to Mr. Alois Malanga from UNIDO. And then I'm going to circle back to William first for the second question in the interest of his time. So, Mr. Malanga, would you be able to give us some UNIDO perspectives for the first question in terms of what are the opportunities for low carbon emission pathways?
Thanks, Deepa. And can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Good afternoon, colleagues, and good morning and good evening to colleagues that are joining us from various parts of the world. I just wanted to sort of give a short deep dive into our bioenergy program, which I think by its very structure is a reflection on some of the challenges and opportunities that exist around the issue of bioenergy and how it can sort of contribute towards more low carbon emissions for agro-industries. As an industrial development organization, our work on bioenergy is very focused on promoting industrial scale bioenergy systems. Why is this important? Is because we recognize that agriculture and agro SMEs are the main source of livelihoods in developing countries. They provide employment, incomes in remote areas. And energy is generally a major constraint to operations of SMEs, affecting their productivity and ultimately competitiveness. There's the issue of energy accessibility, affordability, and also reliability. Most of the SMEs are running on 5 to 10 people operations, and the power cut for a whole day is a serious, significant impacts on those operations. And most SMEs that in developing countries do not have adequate waste management systems, especially organic waste. Most of the waste ends up on the side of the road. And this has a lot of implications in terms of environment, but also broader health issues in the community. So biogas really is systems it's a form of promoting localized energy production, closing the nutrient cycle, and also promoting organic fertilizer, which has implications in terms of local jobs, but also in terms of the new movement towards organic farming. But also biogas helps in two things in terms of reducing 90% of the emissions, but also 50 to 80% of the of the reduction in volume of the waste that has to go to the dumping site. So our program stretches from countries like Chile, Nigeria, Thailand, about 15 countries. And our focus there is on promoting market-based adoption of biogas technologies in industries by especially focusing on issues around regulations and policy frameworks. In a lot of countries, some of the countries that we work in, for you to actually be able to construct a 20 cubic meter biogas system, you need 10 approvals. There's approval on permits, on water, on waste. So we are helping these countries to develop policy and regulatory frameworks where the industrial scale biogas systems can be promoted as a business case. But also we focus on building capacity of market players and market enablers. There is no lack of capacity to do feasibility studies, to transform that feasibility study into an investment opportunity. The people who are in the regulatory process, who are supposed to issue permits, they actually have not much appreciation of why they have to issue a permit around the biogas system. The issue of building industry associations that could lobby for the position and growth and sustainable expansion of these industries, which is very important. But also a bit of awareness raising and knowledge management. And the work that we do in actually providing technical know-how on how to transform some of the feasibility studies that have been gathering dust on the shelves to transform them into investment grade projects. Because given the banking background that I have, there's a lot of money looking for projects, and there are a lot of projects that are looking for money. So there's a gap there. So we are working to try to demonstrate technical feasibility and commercial availability of biogas systems and applications, but also providing investment facilitation services so that we can connect these projects to ultimately to investors. But of course, in this process, we are focusing on issues. How do we involve the youth? How do we address gender mainstreaming? But also looking at standards, because how do we develop a standard of biogas that ensure that there is increased confidence in the industry on one side? It's important for developers, but also if you are a financier, you need to be able to have some degree of confidence that actually this biogas industry system is actually going to operate and produce the amount of energy that is expected. So that's in a nutshell is how we are approaching this industrial scale biogas systems. And as more and more agro-industries become centralized, there's a lot of opportunities for such industrial scale biogas systems, because if you look at all these animal production systems, if you look at all the processing of fruits, vegetables, everything in developing countries, there's a huge opportunity. And I think if industrial scale biogas system is promoted and scaled up, it will actually have a significant impact on the carbon footprint of the agro-industries in general.
Thank you, Alois. That was really comprehensive, and the fact that you addressed the opportunities for workforce development for the youth and to integrate gender in a system that has systemic inequities, but coupled with the transformations we're seeing, particularly in Sub-Saharan Africa, certainly there are a lot of job creation opportunities that needs to be availed. So with that, I am going to pivot to the second question, and And I'm going to start off with asking William to address this very important question. What are the gaps that absolutely need to be addressed at the global level? This is, after all, a global perspective session. So what are the gaps that need to be addressed at the global level to support the transition towards a net zero emission for the agro-industry? That's it's rather a tall order, but hopefully you can
happy to take a first stab at that. And I think someone who's listening, Ben Bowie, also raised this as a topic in the Q&A, which I think is timely. So I think there's macro issues and micro issues around this question. And for me, the main barriers around access to finance, which ultimately will then allow for these types of solutions to be more affordable, decentralized renewable energy solutions to be more affordable to smallholder farmers and collectives. So right now, only 2% of climate finance globally goes to smallholder farmers. And of that 2%, energy has got to be just a small fraction of that. So I don't even know if we have quantified how much climate finance is going to energy solutions for smallholder farmers, but it's infinitesimal. That needs to change urgently. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think that requires rethinking this issue from a rural electrification perspective to one of climate mitigation to climate adaptation and resilience. At the same time, on the resilience side, these are the most climate vulnerable communities in the world that we're talking about. And these types of energy solutions can actually create a lot of resilience for both the communities, but also the production value chain. Yet, again, 5% of tracked financial flows went to adaptation. So not only do we have an absence of climate finance going into smallholder farmers, but most of that financing is going towards mitigation, and very little is going towards adaptation and resilience. So I think there's a lot that needs to be done there. On the micro level, I just say that, I agree that irrigation is, it's definitely gaining traction. It's very important, but it's the low-hanging fruit, and it just has to be the start. It's going to be a much more difficult challenge to ensure that the extra yield that's provided by that irrigation can be converted into added value. So that's going to require new financing and insurance mechanisms that'll de-risk these solutions and make them more affordable. We're already starting to see some movement on demand-side subsidies to do that, some new insurance products that will help de-risk some of these solutions, as well as more dedicated funds. I just heard about one that was starting in East Africa, focused specifically on cold storage. Lastly, I would just say that there's a much stronger need for collaboration between energy, agriculture, and water stakeholders to ensure that these solutions are integrated and sustainable. Thanks.
Indeed, that's an excellent point, that the nexus of energy, water, and ag has never been more important than it is right now. And to your point, the old adage, prevention is better than cure. So you have to put the money where the maximum impact can be. It's on adaptation first, and then we talk about the mitigation. So over to you, Alexander, to the same question. What do you think the key gaps or the prioritization of gaps that need to be addressed at a very global arena to support the transition towards a zero emission agro?
Yeah, thanks, Deepa. Also, thanks to the previous speaker. I also want to follow up a bit with William's comments, finances, for example. When I think about that, in the end, everything has a price. Everything we do costs resources or has a price, and that quite often is not transparent. Very often we see the direct costs, but we ignore or we don't know the indirect cost of a service or product. So that's why I would answer that question. Let's calculate and balance these activities, because then we can give absolute numbers behind the phrases like sustainable or what is green. We can exactly say, or approximately say at least, when we have the data available, what are the resources for which action. And with that, we can then go through an action plan and then can also compare, evaluate the possibilities and also verify. Because a lot of things, I guess everybody wants to go in the more sustainable direction, but for me, it's quite often very fuzzy. What is the total price or what are the total resources invested for such a solution? And here, for example, to become a bit more specific for product or services, we have methods like life cycle costing, which gives you the full direct and indirect cost of a product or services. And then you can also develop business models which then go, for example, into the finance sector and can really contribute to a better solution.
So that's an interesting take. And, we also have this debate around, does sustainable always mean green? So we grapple with that intellectual question as well. Over to you, Eric, for the same question. What are your thoughts in identifying what you think are the key gaps?
Thank you. So I like to stay within the areas where I feel like I have enough knowledge to say credible things. So I'm not the expert on smallholder farming, probably should stay out of that. I'll stick to innovation, which is what I'm most passionate about in general, although I do want to note there are other things that are very important too. I think one of the biggest gaps in climate and sustainability innovation in general is that we have a large amount of funding available for things and a large amount of work happening, but the matching is not fast and efficient enough and good enough in some cases. So there might be some ideas or concepts lying around in places, but they would either be long shot, long-term investments with high risk but high rewards, or I've run into a bunch of groups that are just not skilled at fundraising and turning academic lab scale ideas into deployed projects or products. I think helping with this transition more effectively is one way of getting very early stage technologies or systems into the deployment more quickly. But then, of course, there's this whole funnel of access and making sure that it actually reaches all farmers and gets implemented. And in many cases, I suppose an issue with that is also the complexity of just deploying any new solutions that, they might be better, but you have to change, and change always takes time. So minimizing that is also an important factor, minimizing the, let's say, change overhead of the farmers themselves. But yeah, I would stick mostly to a better innovation ecosystem in some countries. Some countries are doing a fantastic job at this. This is not a global problem, but some regions aren't.
Right. Pilots never fail, but they also don't equally scale, right? So you do need that better innovation ecosystem to selectively and strategically identify what has the most commercial viability. So that's a very interesting angle in terms of the innovation ecosystem that you raised. So Juliet, over to you. Considering the bank frequently targets innovative solutions and helps with the financing aspects. What do you think, beyond what we've just heard, are the key gaps to make all of these scalable and help us in this race to zero emission?
Yes, sure. So if we focus on the gaps, the World Bank funded projects on solar irrigation or cold chain development that we've had in Bangladesh, Rwanda, Mexico, for instance, really showed the complexity of this intervention. Mainstreaming green energy into agriculture required to address very practical challenges in both sectors. So there is one aspect on policy regulatory support for replacing diesel, basically cleaner, more affordable and reliable electricity. The financing aspect and the financing support to cover the upfront costs of the investment, for sure. One aspect is about stakeholders' engagement. We know that including communities, farmers, private sector is critical for the success of a project, but we do not always do it in a very efficient way or in the right way. going back to the smallholder farmers, putting in place a supporting mechanism to aggregate the output of small farmers through association, cooperative is also essential. And finally, capacity building for the deployment of these green technologies, starting with awareness on the available technologies and innovation to the governments, our clients, and at all levels, basically, could ensure really the successful implementation of this program. Also the support for market linkage to make sure that the added output or increased output or the added value brought by the greener use or more efficient process is actually reaching the right markets. So this is about deploying all these elements at scale. It's a work in progress. It's in progress at the bank and outside the bank, but it requires also a real change of mindset within our teams and in our clients' teams, of course.
Thank you. That was interesting. You were narrowing it specifically to the modalities, moving away from the technologies and innovation and the finance aspect. Over to you, Alois. What we'll do is we'll just take 2 minutes for your, key gaps answer, and then when we talk about the third question, you might situate it a little better in the interest of time, if you don't mind.
Thanks a lot, Deepa. And some of my points, the point that I wanted to touch on, have been raised, but I'll focus on few points there. I think the issue that can be tackled at a global level. First of all, we should be talking about the transformation of the food system from a way of life into a business. Agriculture is not a way of life. It should be transformed into a business. And once we perceive it as a business, there are a lot of support. There's a lot of support that is required to make that a viable business. If there are investments in real estate in developing countries, so there should be investment in the food sector and also in the agribusiness. I think some of the gaps that could be addressed much more at a global level. The integrated policy planning and implementation and rollout and resourcing that is required for the food systems to pay attention to the issues of water and energy. So far, the food system, the planning of the food sector or agri sector is done in isolation. There's no consideration of how much energy we need, what's the implication on water. So that integrated policy planning, the rollout, the regulatory, and also the resourcing of that integrated policy planning, I think will be the first thing. The second thing is the role of innovation. We are seeing a lot of innovation, technological innovation in finance that need to be scaled up, so that they can actually have a transformational impact. As society, changes now, there are changes in preferences of diet. There's also the insect-based protein. There's this the effect of digitalization on overall efficiency improvements in agriculture. That should be taken advantage of so that we transition our agricultural system, but also agribusiness processes much more towards efficient and competitive systems. Then there's the streamlining of regulatory and legislative and regulatory frameworks. It cannot be that it takes 2 years to get all the permits for you to implement the biogas project and you expect that sector to be competitive. So there's really a role to work with governments on how to streamline this approval process so that we can actually have a one-stop shop, and also to encourage investors and project developers to come forward and develop these projects and secure financing. So those are some of the, I think, gaps at a global level that that I can see and could need a further attention.
Fantastic. Thanks, Lois. Agriculture as a business, not just a way of life. That sums it. So we are going on to the very last question in our panel, and we just lost William here because he had to leave. So we're going to reorder our way of going between the panelists. So the third and a very important question is how do you contextualize what we've all heard into some specific examples? So what are the examples of industries or countries making progress towards net zero? So I'm going to ask, Alexander to kickstart this conversation. The question is, what are the key examples of insight of industries or countries making those types of progress?
Thanks again, Deepa. So I guess I can't give you many specific examples. So let's make it a bit more general. So at least from our perspective, so I'm a food engineer. I think the food industry is moving a lot, and we had some examples already mentioned. Eric mentioned some examples that we really target a lot of animal-based product alternatives. We talk about meat alternatives, but also now dairy and many others, where we can really gain a lot of interesting new products out of, and also a lot of interesting benefits. The Swiss ecosystem itself is a very strong one. I think in the food research and development one, we have many multinationals located in Switzerland. We have the basic R&D centers of these multinationals located here in Switzerland. It's one of the most innovative countries in the world, according to the indexes. We have very good academic institutions here located. So a lot of push is coming from this very interesting environment. Also, by the way, from very innovative startups on the spin-offs from the universities. And for example, just to give you two very specific examples from the industry side here in Switzerland, one of the leading food processing equipment supplier, Bühler, here in Switzerland, announced that they want to reduce 50% of the energy use of their equipment till 2025. And that was really a self-driven process. Nestle, the leading food company in the world, tries to hit the zero net emission till 2050, which is also the target of Switzerland itself. So I think here are many interesting examples, but we always, and what I mentioned before, need to double check what is the state of the art in absolute numbers. Do we reach our goals? We didn't reach our ultimate goals till 2020 here in Switzerland. There are many reasons for it. I think now we have again new targets till 2030 and 2050 is a net zero. So I think ambitious goals, but again, let's always double check that with absolute numbers, and then I guess we go. Thank you.
Wow, that's interesting. I wish I could I could capture this particular example. I would love to learn a little bit more. Alexander, I'll do an offline conversation with you. So then over to you, Eric. If you know of or heard of key examples of industries or countries that have actually done some significant progress, you can share with us.
I think when we compare countries, we have to be a little careful because it's much easier for some countries to be leaders in something than for others. If we're looking at the global south and we say, Netherlands, Switzerland, whatever, are leaders, like we have the money. So sure, we can innovate. I don't really like highlighting global north countries for being innovation leaders. I'd rather say take a global perspective and highlight individual startups, organizations, products rather than nations, because we're just benefiting from our carbon debt and many other unfair things that have happened in history before any of us were alive and afterwards. So instead of highlighting countries, I'm going to use this to highlight technologies and people. Not that I sort of, there's a lot of that out there, luckily, not in any sort of order or ranking, but I would say one of the biggest innovations that I think will have the largest impact on the future of food would be GMOs. And unpopular topic, but we cover it all the time because it's important. If you have well-tested GMOs that are meant for adaptation purposes, and you deploy them in countries with the changing climate, you can actually get a benefit out of climate change up until 2 degrees Celsius of warming from pre-industrial standards. So I don't just look at the CO2 impact, I look at the whole of the food sector, sustainability for humans and nature. And that, in fact, would be one of the biggest plus points. We could less water, less fertilizer needed, fewer resources in general, much more resilient crops, less vulnerable to disasters. So there's so many benefits that we can get out of ethically usefully developed GMOs. So that would be number one. And lots of work on this ongoing. Unfortunately, also lots of GMO work that I don't support. But got to separate the technology from application. Same with nuclear energy. Aside from that, I think there's a large group of a large set of work going on that Alexander knows a lot more about in the details than I do. So I would rather let him speak about it. But the whole black soldier fly thing is just a miracle. I said this before. I'm going to say it again. That's an example we should all look at and deploy globally, everywhere, all the time. I don't know why it didn't already happen. Like everything and everyone that we farm, every animal should be eating black soldier flies and nothing else. Yeah, that I would highlight, and I also want to highlight. I've worked at MIT for a short while on digital agriculture in Sub-Saharan Africa, and if those two things clash, then you're not alone. I was wondering what they were doing there when I arrived, and they were thinking about deploying sensors on smallholder farms in Sub-Saharan Africa. I was looking into it, and yep, what are you doing there? So there's a huge mismatch between some of the initiatives going on in the global north and being deployed in the global south. It's like the white men telling Africa what to do. Don't want to be one of them. Really annoying, and been part of a team that unfortunately was that, but we were able to realize this and turn it around. So one of the things I also want to highlight are any individuals who work on successful and actually useful technology transfer that listens rather than just imposes what should be done. So rather listening to needs from countries that were historically disadvantaged for unfair geographical and geopolitical reasons, and trying to help with the resources we have, I think that's a big plus and something we should highlight more often, rather than say, the Netherlands doing well in their precision farming. Fantastic stuff, but transferring that effectively and in a socially just way that helps build local capacity and builds local employment opportunities in developing nations, I think is one of the biggest opportunities within the agriculture sector.
Thank you, Eric. Yeah, that is something that many of us here obviously are very passionate about, the just and equitable access to technology, a technology that actually listens them in person, and I really love that. And surely we have to separate technology from application as well. And this whole north-south disparity that you referred to, it is something of a struggle, ongoing struggle, and I believe something is lost in translation. So context, matters every single time before we start deploying, our perspectives or interventions. So with that, really, careful consideration, Julia, do you have, specific examples that you can showcase to talk about how progress has been made, keeping in mind some of the principles that Eric just alluded to?
So I'd like to mention two country examples that the bank has been supporting for many years now, Rwanda and Mexico. So in Rwanda and Mexico.
Rwanda, did you say?
So Rwanda launched in 2019 a national cooling strategy, and as part of that initiative, an African Center of Excellence for Sustainable Cooling and Cold Chain was created last year. So through that center and through that initiative, farmers can benefit from best practices on business model, training facilities. They have also labs where the latest technology is demonstrated, etc. So that helps a lot to foster the adoption of green energy and green technology. Rwanda is also one of the countries where private companies like Inspire Farm, for instance, has financing and supplying innovative products through innovative business model. And so we really see in this country that the topic is somehow taking off. The other example is Mexico with a project that started almost a decade ago on the promotion of environmental sustainable technology in agribusiness. So the project was providing matching grants to agribusinesses, and a decentralized public agency with offices through the country was able to hold, promotional events to demonstrate again the technology, provide targeted technical assistance for the development of proposal and the implementation of the project. There were open calls for proposal to identify interested and then the project was supporting the beneficiaries to do energy diagnostic, prepare business plans, etc. So that was a pretty successful project, and technologies like solar panels, biodigester, energy efficient appliances, etc. were kind of eligible to these grants. So yeah.
Sure.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. We were just informed by our organizers that we need to get back to the plenary. So Lois, I'm really sorry that we cannot get to that particular aspect, but I hope that you would be able to share some of your perspectives back to your own parent organization so that gets incorporated in the policy note that is being formulated. So apologies. So we are going to now switch back to...
Thank you, Deepa. Thank you.
Without any further ado, let's dive into our discussion on the agro-industry with Country Voices perspective, and I will be introducing the speakers as we go. And the audience is also welcome to add their thoughts and questions in the chat function. So this discussion will be aimed at seeking avenues of increasing effectiveness of overall energy management in the agro-industry to reduce costs and increase resilience, considering appropriate renewable energy interventions, but also ensuring that energy efficiency and the demand side are given the adequate consideration. So I think I will start with Mrs. Maria. She is a chief specialist at Astarta Kiev. I hope I said it correctly. And it is one of the largest vertically integrated agro-industry holdings in Ukraine. So, Ms. Maria, what would you say are the main challenges to the adoption of sustainable energy by agro-industry on a large scale? Ms. Maria, the floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. Astarta Kiev is one of the largest vertically integrated agro-industrial holdings in Ukraine. Its main activity includes grain and oilseed production, sugar production from sugar beet. We are #1 producer in the country. Soybean crush and meal production and cattle, as well as storage and handling services. The majority of sugar factories in Ukraine were built more than 16 years ago, and the large investments were needed for the modernization. We attracted loans from international banks such as FMO, EBRD, IC, EIB. These loans were used, among other things, for energy efficiency and the BAT programs, the best available techniques and technologies for sugar factories. The total saving from the implementation of BAT in first stage amounted into significant resources serving, for instance, gas 16%, electricity approximately 7%, water 16%. The second stage of the implementation of the BAT programs started in 2016 to 2020, allowed achieving saving in amount of gas 10%, electricity 12%, water 26%. After large-scale construction, the plants were transformed into modern and efficient enterprises. Further improvement of enterprises involves the introduction of innovative solutions. it's necessary to carry out thorough energy audits of specific power system. This requires both competent, skilled services provide and coherent policy framework. Largely, the policy framework is yet missing in Ukraine. Here, I started working towards integration of renewable energy sources. We have transferred one of the beet pulp during line to pallets made of sunflower hanks, which allow to save up to 24% of natural gas for this process. At the same time, we are faced with barriers associated with changes in Ukrainian legislation. The primary law has been adopted, but however, secondary legislation still at the stage of development. It took longer than expected to carry out an environmental impact assessment for this project, since the existing regulatory framework was providing no guidelines to the technologies and other important aspects. There was barriers associated with influence, expensive and lack of qualification on the area of clean energy projects in the other Ukrainian sugar factories. With the introduction of the principle of circular economy and the use of food waste on our factories, logistics played the role of barriers to its implementation. The prices of waste transportation and delivery for processing products made such project not cost-effective. As a result, the development project for processing waste from elevators into fuel pellets is financially attractive only for small local market. Our key sugar clients are international companies like Coca-Cola and PepsiCo have been acquiring more and more adoption of net zero CO2 policies over the past 2 years. They urge us to show our emission reduction targets, but we just to the beginning of the journey to real monitoring CO2. However, we have already introduction and appreciate policy and have established KPIs for business areas. Thanks to UNIDO programs, we have introduced new methodologies and scaled up existing with regard to KPI setting. At the same time, it is no market mechanism for CO2 reduction in Ukraine on the national level, which is also a challenge to achieve the decarbonization goal of our country. Thank you for your attention for this question, Chair.
Thank you so much for that, Ms. Maria. And I have seen Ms. Salima has just entered the session. And welcome, Ms. Salina.
Thank you.
Welcome. I would like to pose a question. So before I get into the question, Ms. Salina has an extensive experience working with renewable energy, particularly on clean cooking, and is also a civil bureaucrat. Good to see you here. So my question to you is, what are the main challenges to the adoption of sustainable energy by agro-industry, including bioenergy in circular systems and on a large scale? The floor is yours, Ms. Salima.
Yes, thank you for inviting me and thanks for this pertinent question. Sustainable energy solution, we consider both renewable energy and energy efficiency and conservation a part of sustainable energy. So do you want me to focus on renewable energy only, or should I mention about the energy efficiency and conservation measures also? This is
you can mention all of them.
First, another one is when you say largest adoption of sustainable energy on a large scale, do you mean that an agro-based industry would use sustainable energy on a large scale, or it would produce and use renewable energy and energy efficiency and conservation on a large scale? Because when you say large scale, and it is agro-based industry, their core business is different from producing renewable energy or using energy efficiency and conservation measures. So I'm asking this question. And when you say large, how large it is? Say, and sorry for interruption. Azan is going. Call for prayer. Sorry for interruption.
No problem.
So yeah, here, when you say large scale, do you mean that the electricity consumption of an agro industry will fully or mostly depend on energy efficiency and conservation and renewable energy? Even if there is grid electricity connection? I'm asking this question because as empirical evidence show, agro-based industries cannot put much attention on the production and use of renewable energy, and energy efficiency and conservation measures are also difficult to include in their habit, because they are not, the most challenging thing is that they are not very much aware of the benefits of renewable energy and energy efficiency and conservation. So sometimes it becomes very difficult to make them understand that apart from their core business, they put some attention on the sustainable energy also, because that will enhance the sustainability of their business. So as human beings tend to stick to the existing behavior, and it's very difficult to take them to a new solution. So we need to be persistent on our efforts to make them understand and take up the new solutions. So that's a very big challenge. And in Bangladesh, there is another challenge that you cannot go for qualitative and quantitative researches, especially in the areas where you cannot get a visible return. So for agro industries, the use of renewable energy and energy efficiency is not possible on a large scale. That's why we put much attention to other industries, like I don't know whether it is included in textile agro-based industries. I think no. We put much attention on textile industries and garment sector also. So agro-based industries are not in our priority, at least not now, not up to this period. It's not our priority. So it's a great challenge to make agro industry a priority sector, to make them use renewable energy and energy efficiency and conservation.
Thank you for that intervention, Mrs. Salina. That was such an interesting perspective on trying to define what we determined by large scale and also by highlighting the challenges within Bangladesh. And with that, I'd like to move on to Mr. Mahdi. I know you are a seasoned engineer in the food industry. I'd like you to jump in. Mr. Mahdi, please tell us what are your takes on these challenges? Are they similar to Ms. Salina's or Ms. Maria's, or are they different in your part of the world? The floor is yours, Mr. Mahdi.
Thank you, Cheryl. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mahdi Cissé. I work as professor at the High Polytechnic School at the University Cheikh Anta Diop of Dakar. Let me first greeting the organizer for inviting me to participate in this important event. Now, let's trying to answer your very great question. What are the main challenges to the adoption of sustainable energy by agro-industry? To answer in this question, very nice question, first I share with you the typology of agro-industry in developing country, particularly in Senegal. Secondly, I will talk about the potential of renewable energies in food system in Senegal. Third, I present you some elements related to the constant and the different obstacles and about using renewable energy. And at the end, I will focus on some strategies that you are doing, you are implementing now. Now, let's begin with the typology of agro-industry in Senegal. In Senegal, agro-industry is characterized by two groups. The first is the biggest agro-industry companies. In general, this biggest company don't have problem about energies. So they don't think to use renewable energies. The second group is the small and medium agro-industry, including the very smallest. And about this second group, it consists by small and medium agro-industry, which represent at least 10% of all enterprise in Senegal. Furthermore, this agro-industry are mainly composed by marginalized groups such as women, such as youth. And the second point of my intervention is what is the potential of renewable energies in food system in the case of Senegal. The potential for renewable energies is very, very high in Senegal. In fact, we have sunshine all year. All year you have sunshine, and you have also at least 700 kilometers of coastline. At the same time, the competitiveness of the small and medium-sized enterprise in agro-industry sector is very affected by the availability and the high cost of energies. So the energy transition using the potential of renewable energy is very high, and you have a very good demand in Senegal regarding the characteristic of these SMIs, and this transition will be accelerate the development and the transformation of sustainable food system regarding this goal. And if I look very well, the goal number two related to the eradication of hunger in the sustainable development goals can reach by energy efficiency solution. Because if you don't have enough energy, if you don't have a lower cost of the energy, this SMIs, who represented 10% of all the countries of Senegal, don't be able to produce food which high quality to respond at the demand of the population. And these constraints and obstacles now at present, large rural energy access very difficulty to the energy. You have in Senegal, you have this problem. And as I say, despite the high potential of renewable energy, in fact, there are really many obstacles, including those indicated below. The first of constraints or obstacle about me is the lack of awareness of stakeholders about the efficiency of renewable energies. The second constraint is the financial barrier. Small enterprises don't have the possibility to invest in energy, in new energy regarding all the installation at the first time. It will be very cost for the small SMEs. And the third constraint is technical capacity constraint. And the last, but not the least, is unsupportive policy environment. Until now, government don't specify clear policy about the use of energy renewable. And the last point of my intervention is what strategies? I think that in developing countries, you must provide, firstly, some opportunities for practical initiative that develop and demonstrate improved sustainable energy, use support food system transformation. Secondly, we must expand investment in sustainable food system transformation. And third, they may also require the development of specific enabling conditions for food system, for food transformation and renewable energy development. So, in Senegal, as part of the establishment of competitive agropole, now in Senegal, you have a big program based to implement some new agropole. And in part of this program, the state will promote the installation of energy parks based on renewable energies. And I think it's some ways that I share with you to show you how this question is very important in Senegal, and we are trying to deal with this problem and to bring with some solution for using this renewable energy. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Mr. Madi. It's very interesting to see that from different parts of the world, the challenges are almost similar, like when you mentioned the policies and the lack thereof in Ms. Maria's case in Ukraine and also in a developing country in Senegal. So that's definitely something that stood out to me. And now let's segue to Mr. Eduardo, who is the founder and CEO of LATAM Bioenergy. Mr. Eduardo, taking account your experience of the private sector and with certain countries in Latin America, please take us through what you think are some of the challenges, and while you're at it, expound on how you think companies or sector federations or even countries can address them. The floor is yours, Mr. Eduardo.
Thank you, Ms. Sharab, for this opportunity as well. And I think that we are not divorced from all of the problems that Ukraine told and Mr. Madi from Senegal and also Salima from Bangladesh. The problems are similar. I think that the importance of clean, affordable energy is paramount when it comes to production. And energy accounts for at least 30% of the operating cost of any food processing facility. And it has a high potential to reduce the CO2 emissions. I think that one of the biggest challenges Here I'm in the Dominican Republic, and the region is not isolated from the competitiveness of developed nations in affordable energy. If an agro-industry is based on in a developed nation that has a very competitive energy cost, then their production cost, their operating expense, it's going to be substantially those of developing country facilities. So the implementation of a clean energy strategy in developing nation becomes a question of capital allocation to become more competitive in the short run and in the long run. In the short run, the challenge is technology. What scalable technology can be small, efficient, and effective for small to medium agro industry, and if it is and if it has a high cost of implementing that strategy, then it will become a capital allocation problem. So happen on a vacuum. These things are all together a combination of factors that developing nations have against itself. Cost in developing nations, higher financial cost. So also that will be something to target by itself. I believe that the agro industry, especially the mills, have a great opportunity overcoming these barriers. We have found that there is almost a 1-to-1 ratio on energy and the use of their byproduct to create clean renewable energy. It's almost a 1-to-1 ratio to become energy independent, or close to it, depending on that you use. So I think also the formation and capacity building, it's very important to deploy in developing nations. To answer your question on how can address these challenges, where as a developing region, if you want to call it a global developing region, we all have these similar problems. We have higher cost of finance strategies, lesser access to the information that will bring us an efficient solution to the problem, and of course then you will have whatever support to the strategy. I think that a fiscal policy is very efficient, that a country can provide incentive companies that implement this clean energy solution, especially for agro industries. So countries as a whole have probably renewable energy fiscal incentives for deploying elsewhere. I think there has to be special attention to agro industry and food production, and it has become very apparent even in this pandemic situation where food becomes more relevant. We all pay attention every day, but when it comes to availability of good product and good quality of products within your own nation, I think it's time for government to pay good attention to support their own agro industry and to lower their energy costs in a more sustainable way. And I think that fiscal policies towards that, it's an effective tool to make that happen. Also, when you talk about market size, it's very important. When you have a large mill facility, it's large Dominican Republic, but it's very small, for example, in the United States or another market. So the availability of the residue, it's also something to pay attention when you have to solutions that are for individual companies, so that individual processing facility can become energy independent or lesser independent on fossil fuels or the traditional grid. You would have to find ways to have those independent facilities to have access to those clean renewable solutions. They are platforms that can install within the agro-industry that will create symbiosis and a circular economy on the agro-industry that would be that could co-generate it, meaning that it will use biomass to create power, but also use the excess heat for a drying process, and therefore lowering again their own production cost. And because it is not burning, not incinerating, then you would have byproducts that have marketable opportunities, and that byproduct can also included back in the soil as a soil amender. You would create this circular economy that has the potential to lower the CO2 equivalent emissions by a lot. For example, one of these facilities can help to reduce 4,700 tons CO2 equivalent per year, equivalent to 4,000 or something more diesel trucks emissions account over the year. So that's something to take into consideration as well. So wrapping it up, I think we all have very similar barriers, and I think that capital allocation and financial cost it's very important.
Very well put, Mr. Eduardo. And without missing a beat, I will turn to Mr. Fadi. Mr. Fadi is the General Secretary to the Arab Federation for Food Industries, where I know your work involves helping Arab members exchange knowledge on innovative developments to reduce production costs and develop the food industry. So, Mr. Fadi, in your experience in that Arab Federation, what are your thoughts on how companies and sector federations or countries can address these challenges we've talked about? The floor is yours.
Thank you. First, I would like to thank organizer for inviting me to this important forum to discuss some of challenges facing society in terms nutrition, knowledge, environment, and energy. As all know, food is a basic human need from birth to the end of his life. It cannot be despaired with or placed, regardless of progress, development of science and technology. Food industry in Arab world is same in the world. Are considered industry for all productive and service sector, agriculture and industrial. As we know, civilization arose when there was food, clothing, housing, and knowledge. And after that ended due to the disaster and epidemic and lack of food. This time we have epidemic, corona, and have natural disaster. We ask Allah to save us. So, regarding your question, the government must to know what the citizen at now what eat and will eat in the future to achieve food security. About the federation, sectoral federation, its vision to submitting to the competent ministry and the government to determine what is the required and work provided strategy and storage. The federation also provide it to his member to ensure they continue to operate properly. About the food factory and the company need to develop a product in line with the consumer behavior and nutritional needs while ensuring the smooth flow of the supply chain. For example, in Arab country have 430 million people. Every day we need more than 1 billion loaves of bread. What need around 100 kilograms and 60 million tons of weight, 50% import from outside the Arab country, need 5,000 trucks per day and need 900 million baby woven bag and need 43 billion bags annually to packing the bread. Need also equipment, trade labor, waiter, and definitely need the energy. So what's the solution? What can be the solution? Because all my friends talk, if we need the renewable energy and the clean energy, we need a lot of money. My friend, the member in the federation have the flour mill. Every month, the cost of the bill is $50,000. He replaced in solar energy. He invests $2 million for use the clean energy. And when he calculate, he need more than 2 years to back his investment. But it's a huge investment. This is only for a flour mill. Also, now what can we do? I propose draw a ground map for development of Arab agriculture industry to increase agriculture production direct toward food processing with a new modern technology. But we need not cheap technology, but reasonable technology with good price to save energy and water and good quality product, noting that the Arab world has a potential of palm, olives, trees, and grain. This is only one challenge, this bread. We need more than 1 billion, but the food sector is many. And the second, we need the supporting productive agriculture, cooperative society, providing scientific and technical assistance to them and linking them to the food processing sector in the Arab countries with worldwide. And also the Arab countries that own the big countryside, such as Jordan, Palestine, Lebanon, Egypt, Syria, also Iraq. We need what? Developing, qualifying, and raising the capitals of workers in the traditional domestic and rural food industry. In coronavirus, all 90% is staying at home or in countryside. No food, only can make the traditional food and what learn the lady and woman and man, what can we do in this food. Also, we need the providing them with sample new technology and source of renewable energy. 90% of the working in the traditional rural food is women. It's very important. And all the production from the traditional food and rural food is milk, processing pickles, drying vegetable and fruit. Like Mr. Eduardo say, we need some technology to reduce the cost of this one. And also manufacturing jam, molasses and vinegar, olive and dates, and this is all the good for protein and energy for the people. I hope to support the federation, all federation for food industry in all the world, or what the society, to give him, because the federation that between the government and the private sector, federation give all the study and update the study to give the government, and government to make the food security and strategy for food strategy. We need updating the study, because all the company and all the big company told change to this renewable energy will be decrease your margin, and we can, but we must invest money.
Exactly.
It's a huge money. And establishing joint production and servicing project to provide agricultural raw material, especially by following the method of agriculture industry complex. Like Ukraine have many complex agriculture with industry. Also, Mr. Mahdi in Senegal, he said also no have, but we need to make like this one. Salima also from Bangladesh have gap, a very big gap for about agro-industry. We must work together to reduce the waste of food and organic waste by education the community. Now all people, oh, please, I want your waste. Please don't get the waste. The behavior of the food, the consumer of food is from 20, 30 years ago. How can to change it? We must, the community, to find a good and cheap solution to recycle it. Because if the people now, we need the cheap, good food product. The food product, we need a lot of things to make the food product. How can to change it? The most of employees in the small rural food industries have rule. See, so I can believe. And if you told him, please don't make like this one or do like this one, he not believe. See, so I can believe. This is why, and I think it's in all the world, in rural and traditional work in food industry. Example for solar energy also, we need the good quality of food. How can make it the good quality of food and bring the good money? My friend, he have a big farm for palm tree, have dates, is majul. If the date have with bill, the 1 kg, 1 kilogram is around $10. If the bill crack or without bill, the 1 kg is $5. Same tree, same worker, same farmer, same everything. But we must to capacity building to the worker and to know, and packaging is very important to save the food. Also, now in Sudan have a crisis spread. Why? No have energy, no have equipment, no have a capacity building. Also no have the seed, the wheat, no have. Any project need think and fund and start. We must to start, but from where to start? I think we will.
I think we lost Mr. Fadi.
No, I listened to him.
Oh.
You hear me? Okay, I'm finished, and thank you for listening. But we must to give something support, because the same challenge, all the same challenge, high cost. We need the capacity building. We need to change how behavior food. And thank you for you. Shurab, I'm finished. Maybe you should have not heard me.
Hello?
Yes. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I am hear you.
I lost Mr. Fadi along the way. I couldn't hear the last bit of your intervention,
Okay,
but I had the wide array of suggestions that you've put in, and what came out clearly was if we need effective food systems in the agro industry and tied all together with sustainable energy, we must inject finance into our policies, into our strategies. There's no shortcuts and there's no two way about it. And we have 8 minutes left to return to the plenary session. So I think we can give everybody 2 minutes each to give us an overview of what you think the future of the agro industry in our country specific or even on a global context is. And yeah, after this, we can wrap up and go to the plenary session. And if we don't have enough time, it has been an honor to have you on the panel. And yeah, so I think we can start with Mrs. Salima.
Thank you for giving me the floor again. I'd like to talk about the opportunities for developing low carbon emission pathways for agro-industries.
Right. Okay. So thank you for joining this session on the enablers for progress. I'm going to try to be your moderator, an efficient moderator for this session. And we basically have 5 very experienced panelists with different experience from different parts of the world. So that's very good. And we have 3 questions to discuss and about 55 minutes. So that's more or less a little bit more than 15 minutes per question. So for the panelists, please bear that in mind when you provide your inputs. And so without further ado, we'll go, the first 2 questions I think will be maybe more inputs from the panelists and then maybe more a panel discussion for the third one. But without further ado, let's go for the first question. And the first question is, what interventions are needed from governments to create an enabling environment? So policies, regulations, institutional setups for renewable applications, energy efficient appliances, and circular economy practices in the agro-industry sector. So more enabling environment, so more like government actions. So whoever wants to take the floor from the panelists, go ahead. But please be mindful of the time to leave enough time for the other colleagues. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Oliver.
So Jacob, go ahead.
Yes, so specifically looking through the enabling environment, how do we position this? And it would be better that we develop scalable and sustainable solutions that actually address the barriers of awareness, availability, affordability, and appropriateness of the technologies, but also of the business model. And in this case, what should government do? I propose 4 critical pillars. And one of them is on development of supportive policy and regulatory framework that actually action issues around renewable energy and energy efficiency. Second, I will speak into will be the issue around investing in research, knowledge, and skills development on the area of renewable energy and energy efficient solutions, specifically for the food industry. And the third, we'll be looking into financing. And in this case, we're talking about, is the financing available and is also affordable? So can governments make financing available and affordable to support the scale, the integration of renewable energy and energy efficient applications within the industry? And finally, all that said, I think it's important that government speaks into quality standards for the products and services that deliver renewable energy and energy solutions within the food industry. And in this specific case, they should be able to promote minimum energy performance standards. Some certifications, you've just seen the presentation on the energy management system, and possibly trying to also scale and certify people who provide service. So these 4 critical areas is what I think government should be able to invest into. Back to you, Oliver.
I think you framed the whole discussion quite well, Jacob. So who else wants to pitch in and provide input?
Me, can
yes,
I?
Please go ahead.
Okay, I have an engineering company in the field of renewable energies, and we develop projects in many different countries of the global south. And the projects usually die when it's clear that we are working against subsidized fossil fuels, because then the investment is not viable for an agribusiness, for a processing unit that is maybe running on diesel boilers and diesel generators. If that fuel is subsidized, then very often the fossil fuels are heavily subsidized. And when you install renewable energy hardware, you have to invest in the beginning when you install it. And then you calculate a lifespan. And basically, when you run against subsidized fuel, the amortization time becomes so long that it's useless. So this means the number one thing governments can do is stop subsidizing fossil fuels.
Yeah,
that's my perspective.
Easier said than done, Elke, but no, very good point. And in fact, but I mean, if you look at,
I mean, there's even which are more subsidized.
We've done some, if I took my resource person hat, we've done some cost benefit analysis, and true, the financial costs are usually negative, but you need to look at more broadly the economic, environmental, and social costs. So for the government, if they look at those broader costs and benefits, there are usually more benefits in terms of job creation, value addition. So I think you need at the same time to compare subsidies to renewable and reduce, maybe increase them and reduce fossil fuel, but also look at the broader possible benefits. Anyway, this is something that the government must look, and we need to provide them the intelligence, the information on how to do that. Because your question is very, very, very important to Helke, very pragmatic. Anyway, other points on this question?
Can you hear me?
Yes, Bakun, go ahead.
Okay. Yes, actually, in terms of the government role, I think to develop or successfully develop renewable energy application, I think there are 4 major barriers, and those require the government support. I think the first one, of course, we understand that the policy barrier is quite important, because the investment of the renewable energy is quite high. I think the second one is technology barriers, and I think this is very important, because the fundamental problem of technology barrier is the lack of the knowledge, and we need to sometimes import the technology, and that's going to be highly cost as well. The third one, I think, similar to Jacob just mentioned, I think the financial barriers. So somehow the government can play a role in a form of like soft loan or some investment promotion programs, something like that. So I think these 3 barriers can be overcome with the government strong policy on support of that kind of issues. So that my comments on the role of the government.
Okay. Marco and Rami, any views?
Yes, if I can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. I think what said by colleagues is very exhaustive. In general, I have just a remark on a specific situation, which is not only strictly related to the regulation of the renewables, but more in general of the electric grid. Because in case, let's say, in several energy audits we proposed maybe photovoltaic system, for example. And if in the country, let's say, the regulation, there is not a free market, in any case, there is no possibility to sell the electricity to the grid. There is a strong need to match, let's say, the peak production of the photovoltaic system, for example, with the actual self-consumption of the company, of the plant, the industrial plant, or what is. And therefore, it is sometimes you can't, let's say, you have to reduce the size in order not to avoid excess of peak energy, maybe around midday, especially in case it is not coinciding with the peak consumption of the plant. Instead, if there is the possibility to sell, it is possible to size the average power, let's say, on so something also bigger. So okay, in case of photovoltaic, there is not so much scale effect on the capex, but in any case, it is more comfortable for the company, the sizing itself and the matching with the loads. And in case there is no load in that moment in the company, in any case, they can continue selling outside to the electrical grid.
Right. So you mean policies like feed-in tariffs, for example, that allow you to sell energy to the grid if there is a grid?
Exactly. If there is a grid, and even if without feed-in policies, just the possibility to sell to the grid, because in some markets, let's say, an industry cannot sell to the national grid, maybe.
All right. Okay. Rami, point of view?
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we do. Go ahead. Yes, we hear you.
Okay, great. So basically, I'm gonna focus on two components that were highlighted by Jacob. One, knowledge and skills. I work for Beritech. It's an entrepreneurship and SME support organization, and we've realized that there is, when it comes to getting those policies to work with governments, if they are. It's about awareness. It's about ensuring that we have the skill sets to be able to do it, from the engineers to the technicians and so on. One thing that was not much highlighted, I think, through the discussion so far is also the energy efficiency component, where there's a lot that could be done that would also save on, the use of fossil fuels. So even if people are using, traditional ways of energy, if we can work on energy efficiency as well, there's also a big impact on the CO2 and so on. So what would be, are they taxes on energy efficiencies or mechanisms sent to the government? Energy efficiency mechanisms, with subsidies, with financing for substitution of highly energy consuming to be able to replace them. That could be one, and that would hit into the financing component. The second one is to try locally driven innovation. Kwakun or Heike have mentioned that there's a need technology or knowledge from other. What can we do in the global south to push for more innovations that are not necessarily maybe top notch, but more frugal, that could meet, micro businesses that uses, that processes food and help them to become more energy efficient and more sustainable on the long run.
Yeah. One thing that I haven't heard is, and I want to have your views on this, is in my view, my experience, there's often a lack of kind of coordination between the ministry that deals with food, let's say agriculture or food, and the Ministry of Energy. So both ministries plan things separately. The Ministry for Food or for Agriculture takes it for granted that energy is a given, whereas it's not. And so my view, when we start working at FAO on these linkages, we always try to have a working group at ministerial level which involves the relevant ministries, environment, food and energy, I don't know what's your point on this, because for me, from an enabling environment, it's very important that these two ministries at least talk to each other.
Yes, Olivia, I think you spot on the point. What is actually happening is issues around renewable energy and energy efficiency are looked as issues for energy ministries. And yet this energy should actually be looked as an enabler for others to perform. So especially for the agricultural ministries, they should be able to recognize this as an enabler. What are we going to do? And that means we need that coordinated kind of institutional work around. And this is lacking for most of the country. And this is one of the areas that we should have to recommend government to be able to work together, but also build partnerships with the private sector, because it's critical. So public and private sectors have to work together, because in the end, if we want to institutionalize renewable energy and energy efficiency, especially within these businesses, then as government, we need that coordinated support in developing a supportive policy and regulatory framework that actually enables a bit of energy service companies, which are private service companies, that are able to deploy some of the market-led models that could actually be able to unlock some of these financing barriers, skill barriers, which is critical. It needs that coordination.
I think, Jacob, you're making my job easy, because I mean, these questions about involving the private sector kind of nicely lead us to the second question, which is about how to determine when investments in renewable energy technologies and/or energy efficient appliances in food chains and food systems or agriculture are really worthwhile. So the whole issue of the needs for coordination as an enabling factor for investments, but there are other things that are enabling factors for private sector investments. And so again, whoever wants to take the floor, please, from the panelists, please go ahead.
I can just give the pragmatic input on how it is now, because like my company is contacted by enterprises from different countries who say, oh, we are producing this or that food product and we want to do this with solar energy. What do you suggest? And then we develop a plan for them. And it all comes to the point whether this investment will allow them to enter a new market or a new market niche so that they can benefit, or if this will allow them to save on costs on the other end, cost for fuel or savings in terms of avoiding penalties or CO2 costs, or it will strengthen their image in a way that indirectly their customers or the public will have a better view of them and they will thus benefit. So this is what happens in the reality. And then, of course, I'm sure you have a much broader perspective, not looking only from the thing between the entrepreneurs, the company that supplies technology and know-how, and the company that wants to produce.
Right. So I think, Helke, what you highlighted there is that what are the advantages for the food chain actors in switching?
Yeah, this is what actually counts at the moment, because it is between them.
Yeah, exactly.
To invest. Normally.
Okay, so that's from the food chain actors. Other points of views from our panelists.
Yes, I think to me, looking at this particular question is one, just from the early explanations from the other panelists. It's also critical to recognize the environmental and social benefit, which to this case, I think government should be at the forefront of promoting. That beyond the cost reductions, beyond the return on investment for that private sector, we should recognize that environmental and social co-benefits should be critical to make it work.
Which actually, Jacob, means that you need to provide incentives
so that these benefits can unravel. Because if it's just a matter of financial profitability, at best we are often on borderline here.
Exactly.
So from the government, that's why the links between the private sector and the government, for example, for that is important. So
Yes.
that was a view actually from the supply side, let's say from the energy side, what should be done to facilitate investments. Before we heard the point of view from the agri-food sector. Right. Any other points of view?
I would say from the energy sector, it's important to look. You fact that the Ministry of Energy and the Ministry of Agriculture and Agri-Food do not talk to each other, and this. But I believe a lot of the ministries of energy have to look at how in those countries are working, and what's their transition plan in terms of energy shift, and this is where incentives would work. That Marco has mentioned that is highly important. Only at the business itself, but we're looking at the grid and the network, and how can those businesses would only buy their energy to others, which will make less load on the grid, which will cost the government maybe less maintenance and on their own. So there should be some sort of an incentive that would optimize the whole use of energy in the country, and knowing that the industry is a big consumer of energy, there could be a lot of benefit to look at this from that perspective.
Right. I'm just seeing a question about, how can we address the fact that investments in renewable energy are quite expensive for small-scale farmers? But okay, I have one answer for that is there is a model where you create like an anchor demand, because very often the lack of or scattered demand is a bit of a barrier, because you don't guarantee the demand, then the supply is risky for the energy company. But if you have a big demander, and then the smaller ones are attached to that, then it's a sort of a guarantee for the investor. And also you can have farmer groups or cooperatives. So then it's a guaranteed demand. I'm thinking, for example, milk cooperatives in India or in other countries. So I think we need to work on the demand, because the demand is there, but it's often very small and scattered. And this complicates the picture. Anyway, I'm just switching too much to my resource person here.
Olivia, maybe I could provide some insights with a particular example for us as SNV. At SNV, we're implementing an agribusiness project, and specifically is climate resilience agribusinesses for tomorrow. And our entry point to making this to making smallholder farmers climate smart is through cooperatives and agribusiness SMEs who are either aggregating these products or are adding value. And in so doing, we're trying to facilitate integration of renewable energy and energy efficiency solutions into these cooperatives, who then bring the bulk of the smallholder and the agribusiness SMEs. And we do this by trying to co-create bankable climate smart business plans, and then trying to de-risk access to commercial financing. Because at the end of the day, that these smallholder farmers may have difficulty first in accessing available financing, but also how it's affordable to him or her. So the best way is to ensure that the entry point is through cooperatives or agribusinesses who then provide that demand for the service, and possibly can have a scaled kind of technology and a good business model to make this business case be bankable and also attractive to the private.
Yeah, okay. So I think this is an interesting point. Any other points of view from other colleagues from the panel?
I would add if energy was not used in some of the practices in the value chain. So when you're talking about the first mile of milk or first mile of vegetables or wholesale market where there is no proper refrigeration, let's say, or cooling for the products, and they need to invest into a new practice, I think this is where the integration of renewable energy from the start would make much more sense than converting to going back to traditional energy. So some entry points into using renewable energy efficiency as a first step might be better than just, might be a quicker win for the sector than converting in some places.
Right. If I may, again, I mean, we don't look enough at the synergies between uses of energy, I think, in rural areas. If you think about the fact that if you have a source of reliable, affordable, and sustainable energy in a rural place, it can be used for food chains, but it can also be used for other things. And at these times of pandemic and so on, I mean, you can use the same source of energy for health purposes. I mean, powering clinics and pumping good quality water, for example. So if you combine not only the food chain uses with other ones, then it makes a strong investment case, maybe not so much financially, but economically, which is where the public-private sector partnerships that somebody was mentioning before comes really into the picture. So I think we should look at beyond the agri-food sector also. Okay.
Actually, can I add some points for what you just mentioned? I think there is a case, like you just mentioned, in food chain. There are some ways that you can turn waste to value. In that case, I think, you can utilize those ways. For example, in our country, there are some agro-industry that generate a lot of waste, and that come to your point about the supply and demand. So they can collect waste easily because it's produced tremendously in a factory, and those waste can generate, as the renewable energy, for example, as biogas, and those biogas can, generate those electricity or steam that can then be used in other application, in other household or factory, or in other thing else. So I think that's important that you have to link those waste from those food chain and then apply economic or effective technology to convert that. So by that way, it can be economic feasible.
Yeah.
That's what I agree.
And in the particular case of the use of residues, I mean, if you produce biogas, then the byproduct is a biofertilizer or biochar, which can be used in the food chains, in the production stage. Right. So the whole, exploring the whole circularity of the links between this agriculture and food, again, can be a way to promote investments. In this case, it's bioenergy. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to comment on the comments in the chat, because I think the last two people who said something, they were all relating to small farmers. And this is, of course, rather difficult to access small farmers with technologies that mean high investment, like renewable energy technologies. So what I have seen in practice is that wherever small farmers produce products sold on the global market as even luxury items, let's say, I'm talking about things like essential oils or spices or vanilla, where there is a high value addition. It is often small farmers that produce this. In many parts of the South, I can give you numerous examples. And when it is possible to link organizations of those small farmers and the guys who buy it on the global market, be it the companies that work in the perfume industry, or be it spice traders and their customers, then it is possible to directly channel money to the small farmers to invest into solar energy or biogas or whatever. And this is a chance. It has not too much to do with the government, which is actually also a chance. Just doing it directly between the consumers and the producers.
Yes, very good point. You need to have these high value products so that you can also get a good premium from your sale. But also we absolutely need, we need to make sure that some of these additional benefits from high value trickle down to the farmers, to the producers along the way, because it's another challenge. Right. We are moving slowly to the last question, which is actually, we already, I think, partly answered, is which business models are proven to be successful? From your experience, should it be an energy company doing everything, or an agri-food company doing everything, or an anchor model, as I mentioned before, or just small-scale projects? What kind of, maybe also the kind of innovating financing instruments that you came across? I'm just thinking loud now about something we didn't talk, is financing instruments, which are part of the business models. So, okay, whoever wants to take the floor.
Well, probably I can start first. I like the idea that I, went through the discuss paper mentioning about the sustainable energy food system integration. And I think that also similar concept that we have a proven success case in Thailand, that is the sustainable energy and agro-industry system integration. Let me give a case that in Thailand we produce a lot of tapioca starch, and during the process it generates a lot of wastewater. We are currently successfully in waste a biogas system in start factory. They can produce a lot biogas from wastewater, and those biogas is now used to produce heat for drying the starch, and some of biogas can be also used to generate electricity. And although we have a success story, but it took several years to to demonstrate the technology. So I think a good business model, right? You just asked. I think the idea rather to have the energy company, but I like the idea of integrate, renewable energy production on site of those agro-industrial factories, something like that. So that is my experience.
Right. But I mean, the question becomes, should one company do the whole integration, the energy company, for example, go and do also the food business, or conversely, the food business company also deal with energy, or should we keep one company for energy and one company for food, or small companies? I mean, if you have any experience, so one does everything, or we keep things separate?
I think in my case, it's not just an energy company does all things, but it happens to be, the food company that, produce or invest to produce their own renewable energy, in my case.
Which in this case, Kun, it's pretty well capitalized food businesses. I mean, it's not small-scale farmer cooperatives, for example, because for them it's quite a. But your example is very important, because if you have medium and large-scale food companies, then they can integrate the energy business. Yeah.
You are right.
Okay. Good.
I would look at the business model from it. Go ahead, Jacob.
Okay.
Yes.
Is it? Can I go on?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes. To me, one, looking at these business models, I'm trying to look at what would be a market-led model, because I'm trying to look at sustainability and scale in this particular case. And also, we realize that it is only through these business models that we would break the higher upfront costs around financing, even the limited capacity for these institutions to integrate renewable energy technologies, but also energy efficient practices. And in that particular case, you realize that most of these SMEs in agro-processing, or possibly cooperatives, or even those at medium scale, have conflicting needs for their capital. So we need models that will, in one way or the other, free up capital for other investment priorities. And then speaking back to the earlier model, that means then, of course, the energy performance contracting, where we have the energy service company coming on, is critical, because then they address two critical barriers. One, they're able to address a capacity issue, but also they're able to address a financing issue. And we have three players within this. We have the user, but also we have the energy service company to bring in this kind of expertise and experience. But also we need to bring in the financial institutions here, because later on financing institutions are used to the traditional financing. But we're saying it's no longer business as usual. It's business unusual that you should actually be able to put in money to energy efficiency and renewable energy. So to me, at that higher level, it works that way. But also at a smallholder farmer level, we're trying to test a model around the inclusive agribusiness model, where, of course, working through the cooperatives, and cooperatives, again, linking with the energy service company, because then they bring the expertise of the technologies and possibly deploy specific service delivery model, where they're again going to break the barrier of possibly affordability, but also in terms of availing that technology to the farmers. So to me, those are the two models that I've seen trying to work, and especially the energy service company, because those two critical barriers need to be addressed by somebody with expertise and experience. But again, bringing the financial institutions into play is very critical for these models to function sustainably.
So just Jacob, if I understood well, one model is basically the energy service companies to support the SMEs, and the other one is an inclusive agribusiness model, where basically the agribusiness does everything. Is that correct?
No, again, what we need to understand is in this case, the very first model, I would call it the energy performance contracting model. Why? Because in the two models, you still need an anchor company that has skill and experience. So even with the agribusiness, it takes on the issue around mobilizing finance, but you need that expertise of the technology, which is lacking. You also need to ensure that it's made affordable to provide the upfront cost. So in the end, each of those models operate with an energy service company that is stronger to provide specific services, either within the food industry or other industries. And that's why I came from a point that all these models have an anchor around a service company. So it means that within our supportive and policy regulatory framework, we then need to ensure that how do we make this energy service company deploy some of these market-led models if we really need to have that reach and sustainability around it. Because ideally, we will not say it's either government, it's either this group, but at the end of the day, government needs to provide that enabling inside that an energy service company, because it's now lacking in this. Thank you.
Any other inputs?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, from my side, yes. I would like just to confirm that my understanding of this point is very near to that of Jacob. Basically, let's say, in my experience, we understood that for especially small companies or cluster of companies or industrial zones, like an ESCO approach can be useful, because if we move from some very simple technology like maybe photovoltaic, which can be installed even on private houses, but starting to move to other technologies, there is in any case a need maybe for a centralized knowledge, let's say, to help them. At the same time, instead, we had a lot of experience for larger companies, let's say medium large ones, from some 100 employees up, let's say. In this case, usually they tend to have the technical capabilities to manage also more complicated systems. For example, especially speaking about renewables in the agribusiness, I am thinking to anaerobic digestion system and production of electricity via combined heat and power via biogas and so on. So in these cases, let's say usually they can develop internally or they can develop internally the capabilities to do this. And as a second and last remark, a little more related, not to your question, but more in general to the business model. Yes, personally, in RINA, we work a lot with international financing institutions, especially the BRD, also UNIDO for sure, and we a little with the World Bank, and in general, when we made this type of activities like energy and resource efficiency audit, also evaluating the potential for renewable investment, we understood that there are two main ways, let's say, which are important in terms of type of financing. In case of bigger companies, usually direct financing is also from international financing institution is the typical way. For small medium enterprises, usually, especially the BRD setups like credit lines, which are conveying, let's say, international funds through local banks, and this helps a lot, let's say, because allows to, let's say, to develop this financing in energy efficiency and renewable energy, working on, let's say, the type of clients and small medium enterprises which are already let's say client of the selected banks. So therefore, maybe it is more useful also to help the identification for further investments, I think, because if they are a small medium enterprise, maybe for an international institution like the BRD or World Bank or UNIDO, it is more difficult to go to each potential small client to identify the specific opportunities for investment. But in this way, it is easier, let's say, to vehicle these funds also through the existing portfolio of clients of local banks.
Yeah, I think your point was more from how to help energy companies being financed. But I'm looking also at how about the consumers, the users, how to finance their possibility to pay for energy. I'm thinking of pay-to-go, patient capital. I mean, now that's for the supply. But I mean, things to facilitate. And so, you know, the company, the energy company could also deal with food appliances, for example. And so then it's a full package in the sense that the energy company also supplies, let's say, the mills for agri-food company for processing. And so it's like a package. And so there, I think you can really have interesting deals to make access to the equipment, but also to the energy. I don't know if you have a comment on this, but I think this is also interesting. Maybe from Rami?
Yeah, I would second that, Olivier. I think when it comes to we've talked a lot about renewable energy, and I go back to the energy efficiency component, and that comes with the machinery, that comes with financing. Jacob has highlighted the fact that, you know, we're looking at the energy efficiency, the energy service companies that measure performance and recommend plans, and this is an excellent way for, you know, small and medium businesses that want to move into that, you know, process with access to capital to jump in with a energy company or a company that will install machineries or infrastructure or whatever needed to make more efficient. The opening speech of Mrs. Shaker on Juhayna highlighted heavily the fact that they saved a lot of money and a lot of energy costs by mechanisms, which on the long run made it more beneficial for them. Now, I understand that there might be countries where there are subsidies on energy and diesel and whatnot, but I think in a lot of our countries, especially in the southern part of the globe, there's a lot of energy issues in terms of energy. I come from Lebanon, and I know in a number of countries around us, energy efficiency is not there. There's on the grid, there's a lot of energy cuts and so on. And a lot of the agro processors have to invest in a number of backup solutions to keep their operations running. And that would cost them quite a lot. So looking at business models where there is minimum capital for the businesses, where there are some sort of guarantees, where some sort of facilitation would definitely help the integration of more energy efficiency and renewable energy use in the different businesses.
Right. Okay. So your point is that before jumping immediately into renewable energy, if we can try to find solutions which are maybe cheaper and in terms of energy efficiency and better energy use, could be an intermediate stage. And I tend to agree. I mean, sometimes it's simply not the time to go immediately into renewables, and just being energy efficient already saves quite a few greenhouse gas emissions. All right, so we have 2-3 minutes actually left before we have to go to the plenary. Any key thing that has been missing, or burning comment that you would like to make? Yes, Ami, go ahead.
Okay, so I want to focus. I work with a lot of innovators and entrepreneurs, and I think there's so much opportunity for young people, young engineers, technologists, and so on to optimize on a lot of this. We haven't talked about digitization, and I think there's a lot of opportunities when it comes to analyzing IoT devices, analyzing energy losses. There's a lot of opportunity. Energy mechanism, whether it's mechanical, heat-driven, or solar. There are so many opportunities for new technologies that could be developed by new innovators. Part of the enabling environment for governments would be, how can we push for more R&D and commercialization of innovations that fit markets, different things. It doesn't have, all of it has to come from one country or one area. Different countries has different particularities, and I think it's very important when we talk about enabling progress in the agro industry or in the renewable and energy efficiency sector to provide innovators a space, an enabling environment, and the right financing for them to create new solutions, especially the agro-food sector that requires a lot of that, and a lot of solution could be fixes that would with not necessarily huge investments. So frugal innovation could play a role in many cases, for example.
Okay. Any other burning thing? Yeah. It's a bit of a challenge for me to be able to report about so many interesting things. So please bear with me in the plenary if I miss something, or maybe you can jump in the chat box, but I'll try to do my best.
Okay. So to me,
anyway, I think yes. Go ahead, Jay.
My last parting shot is issues around renewable energy and energy efficiency integration. It's really a mindset change shift that we require fast to embed. And to me, it then becomes a new normal within the agro-industry, that we build that new normal. And we build it while striving on either it's being cost-effective, but also resilience, and on the other side, a low-carbon pathway. So within those pointers is where we could be able to say, how do we change that mindset and that culture? And again, goes back to the trainings and the skilling and the rest. And once we first achieve the mindset change, then the rest of the pillars just come falling to make this area.
I think what I get from you is that in terms of how ensuring enough energy and energy savings, let's say clean energy in food chains, is not only good for the business and for whatever the greenhouse gas emissions, but simply in terms of resilience of the food business and the farmers and the processors, and in the face of climate change. So the whole addition of climate change kind of challenges, and which are real in many of these countries that we've been talking about, it's absolutely true. So it's, yes, okay, point gotten, because this is also a way to sensitize governments to work better together. And in this case, it's energy, it's agriculture / food, it's water, and it's environment / climate. But I think we need to demonstrate that it works, and I think demonstrate pilots through experiment by the private sector, thanks to some grants and some piloting, becomes key, because then the government becomes convinced. If you don't have a way to convince the government that they need to work together, it's difficult. So maybe start from local governments working together, and then you convince the national governments. That's from my experience, because otherwise they see what's there for me. And then you say, well, we'll take you to a place where this integration has worked. And let's not forget that farmers and agri-food actors are voters. So there is also a vested interest by governments. Anyway, any last comment from colleagues?
That was a very interesting point. From my perspective, projects were more successful when governments were not involved.
Right, but then you have
so it's
then you have small projects. You have what I call the small island project syndrome. Is that if you want to scale up, if you want to replicate, you need the governments to be involved.
Exactly.
So
yeah, that's right. But I said this because Jacob mentioned that the mindset of somebody has to be changed, and I think.
Here, these are the results from our poll. Thank you so much to everybody who submitted their answer. And if you haven't, while we wait for our moderators, I see 2 of them joining, you can still respond. I see new answers. Industrialization is becoming popular. Investment and cash flow is becoming popular. And like I was mentioning, it seems like these are really resonate with the different discussions that were happening in our breakout rooms. So with this note, I will welcome Mr. Olivier and Ms. Deepa to the stage. Hi.
Okay, very, very fruitful, and so many things that were discussed. I mean, I'll try to do my best to summarize. Our first question was about what action from the government to promote investments on energy, clean energy in food chains. Summarize, and there was kind of 2 blunt comments. You say, well, projects on that without governments work better, but the response to that is then, yes, fine, but if you need to scale them up, you need government intervention, you need an enabling environment. So we have to bear with governments. The second one, which was very pragmatic, is to say, well, with all the fossil fuel subsidies, then how can we ensure competitivity in terms of financial costs and so on with renewable energy? And there we said, well, that's all fine, but it's not only about renewable energy, it's also about energy efficiency. So you can start by you can think about working on energy efficiency, even if you start with fossil fuel systems, and this will already save money, save greenhouse gases, and so on. So we should not focus only on renewable energy. And some things that came out is that there is often a lack of coordination between relevant ministries. Ministry of Food doesn't talk to the Ministry of Energy, and they don't talk to the Ministry of Environment. And so what we need there for them to see that there's a value for them to work together is to show them some realities, some piloting that work and so on. And then the agri-food sector people can say, well, you know, this thing is good for us. And because they are also voters, it might resonate to the government people. But in terms of barriers, there is obviously some enabling environment barriers. One is what I mentioned, the whole enabling the whole coordination. But in terms of policies, you know, thinking of reducing fossil fuel subsidies and increasing subsidies for renewable energy is important, and see what are the impacts for the government, the treasury, is important. But also policies like enabling the sale of excess energy that these agribusinesses can have, feed-in tariffs, but also other systems. Not forgetting credit systems, subsidies, but also smart incentives that, you know, if the business uses renewable energy, the agribusiness, then they get soft loans, they get tax breaks for financial facilities. Another point was the quality standards, because all this is nice, but if the systems don't work, then the agribusiness will lose credibility into these new renewable energy and energy efficiency solutions, because it's money they have to invest. So you need to guarantee the quality of the investment into energy solutions. And well, okay, the whole business about knowledge of these technologies, and obviously, if you mean the local capacity to, you need quality standards, you need the local capacities to guarantee these quality of the energy system. And maybe we start with local coordination and local systems that then will convince the national government people that the advantages of combining energy and food in planning, but also considering the water aspects, which in many countries, the water, energy, food nexus is really relevant, especially where there's water scarcity, for example, like in the Middle East. Then when we moved to the private sector issues, when is renewable energy technologies good for investments? Well, one reality is that if you only look at the financial profitability of renewable energy, it's often borderline, if not negative. But you need to look at the broader costs and benefits in terms of job creation, value addition to the food products, health aspects. So all these economic aspects, broadly speaking, but also the environmental aspects, greenhouse gas emission reductions from energy efficiency, from renewable energy, also byproducts from bioenergy that can be used for land improvement, therefore, and also the water quality systems. All that are not financial, they are economic benefits. Also, and then this is where the public-private partnerships become key, because the energy companies might not be interested, but from a government point of view, it's important. The other point is that if the business case of the farmers, the agri-food actors, is improved through better access to energy, then they can better afford paying the right cost for energy, which means an improvement of the business case of agri-food actors is also good for energy company actors, their business case. And this is absolutely key, because they often don't look at that, and the public-private sector is important for that, but also the government and the financing institutes. Again, coordination between the two sectors is important. And this possible synergy in terms of business plans is often overlooked. Another key point, we need to find ways to regroup demand for energy from the agri-food chains. So you may even either have a big agri-food company, we call it the anchor, which guarantees demand for the energy company, And then you can have smaller businesses related to that. And not only for food, but also for health clinics, for good quality water. So the whole post-COVID program comes into the picture. And if you don't have a big anchor, then you need to regroup the demand. Small-scale farmers, cooperatives, for example, or agro-industry parks like UNIDO supported agro-industry parks in Ethiopia, where you have a demand which is concentrated for energy from agri-food sector. And then this is a very big, but also then you can have contract farming. So long as the energy demand is concentrated, then you can have whatever scheme you have in terms of the farmers, either a big company or contract farming. And then like in many places in China, for example, you distribute the energy, the biogas, to the farmers. But the key thing is to regroup the demand. I'm probably missing a lot of things here, but in terms of we also thought about incubation food energy models. I'll come to the third question, the business models. You either have a big company, either energy or food, with enough capitals to do both, food and energy. In this case, they go directly for financing, the traditional financing, private banks and so on, but even public banks. If you don't have that, then you need, again, to regroup the demand, and you need what we call energy service companies, which facilitate the link between the agri-food SMEs and the energy supplier. And this is where you need also public banks and international banks, not only private banks that help that. Another model, which is you combine the supply of energy to the supply of agri-food appliances, because then you can have a package for the agri-food sectors with good prices, but also you guarantee the demand. You guarantee the demand, and you guarantee the quality in terms of energy, renewable energy or energy efficiency. I've probably missed a lot of points here, but really so rich. Thank you very much.
So much, Olivier. I'm sure the rest of the points can be captured definitely in the note. And I was attending part of your working group, and I could see the dynamics around policy framework and governance, which occupied a good space of the discussions. But maybe for the sake of time, let me move to the working group 2 with the Chirop to try to share with us briefly on the main conclusion, and then we go to the last group. Please go ahead, Chirop.
Thank you, Ali. I will be very brief because most of the points that we raise in the country voices, despite having people from different regions, we found out that most of the challenges and the strategies are similar. So the challenges that we found were that policies were lacking, the lack of coherent policy frameworks were missing in different countries. And then also financial barriers and lack of a technical capacity not being sufficient enough within the agro-industry in the context of sustainable energy. And the strategies that were raised were expanding investments, and we saw that without injecting money or finances into the agro-industry business, or like the agro-industry and sustainable energy, then milestones cannot be achieved. So having fiscal policies, and also another strategy that came about was that cogeneration came in handy as maximum production was ensured, as well as the self-production of clean energy. And another strategy was having support through technical assistance and capacity building programs, which one example that was raised was an idea factory to motivate the staff. And that's it from our country voices breakout room. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was also very nice to see the nice distribution in your working group, that you covered very interesting setup of perspectives. So we'll come to this. Now to the last group, group 1, and I think I would say also the most attended one in terms of statistics, according to my calculations. So Diba, you must have a lot to tell us about the discussions there.
It was a very fascinating and dynamic discussions indeed, and I don't think I'm going to be able to do justice to the richness, because we had perspectives coming from an academician, as well as to entrepreneurs, to the bank and the UNIDO, to set the stage. So I think that the key elements, I believe Oliver and Sharaf have touched, and you too did, Ali, in your opening remarks. But the key things that came out of the discussion was that even before we get into the questions, we should have the adequate tools to look at sustainability assessments around the industries from all three dimensions: the environment, the economic, the social, so that you don't lose sight of the fundamental tenets of what sustainable development is in terms of renewable energy. And then the points that were made was that absolutely, if biomass is something that we're looking as an integrated solution to utilize towards bioenergy, then you do need to design hybrid solutions that are able to couple with the existing traditional technologies with the modern technologies. This was one example of a type of innovative approach to use hybrid solutions, such as the cooling water tower used in Rwanda, in Nigeria, and some other solutions that were proposed in Mexico. But there was also a lot of discussion around social aspects, believe it or not, talking about the global equity and what does global well-being mean, and what is the role that agro-food industry plays in ensuring this global equity and global well-being. And then carbon is a much bigger part of agriculture. So if we look at carbon from the angle of food loss, food waste, we are losing enormous amounts of energy right there. So not only from the perspective of access to food, but also from the aspects of conservation of resources that we immediately have. You must look at that equation of carbon loss, a carbon emission due to directly attributable to the food waste that is occurring. And simplistically speaking, a speaker actually highlighted that green fertilizer equals green energy, and it works both ways. So you can be that precise if you wanted to look at some solutions. And today's food technologists have come up with such great innovative solutions, such as the artificial meat protein and then utilization of the black soldier fly, etc. Being able to use technology is one thing, but to use it in a timely fashion is another, and to redirect targeted investments towards these innovations, because not all innovations are equal, not in terms of impact, not in terms of access, not in terms of equity. And where do you actually redirect these innovations? Do you make it as a global north solution? Are there disparities between north and south in terms of access, but also applicability? So you have to keep context in mind and adapt these innovations where it makes more sense, particularly in the context of smallholder agriculture, where a lot of this energy loss is actually occurring due to lack of awareness, lack of capacity development, lack of access, and where subsidies and policies can come into play. They must focus on the global south in terms of smallholder agriculture. There were some interesting examples that were shared in the very last part of the session. Examples range from Switzerland to Mexico to Nigeria. There's not enough time to capture all of that, but I'm sure the recorded sessions will adequately, target those important aspects. So I think the bottom line was, what is green, what is sustainable, and where do we target these investments and innovations, and where do we find the most scalable impacts that actually make the most sense. I think the last session could have gone for another hour, clearly, and I'm sure that can be said to other panelists as well.
Thank you so much, Deepa. I think you ended with some also major questions that you were also providing as a conclusion, which I think they're very relevant. And as you just mentioned, I think it's difficult to capture everything in this short time, but the recorded sessions as well as the interactions we'll have with all of you to summarize all of this will help us to put everything in perspective. I really would like to thank you all. I was jumping from a session to a session, trying to listen here and there. And, in group one, when I jumped in, the discussion of the North and South when it comes to innovation was very interesting for me as well. And what's common, I think, for me reflects exactly what my colleague Anna put on the slide. In the center was all about government policies. And I think the three of you have confirmed the same. Although the discussions were going on the importance of having government policies and policy frameworks, at the same time, I think, it keeps in my mind what comes first. Do we put policies to attract or encourage industrialization in the food sector and then energy comes? Or we bring energy, then industry comes, and then we do the policies? I think this is going to continue to be the debate. But I really would like to thank you so much. I took lots of notes, and my colleagues, I'm sure they extracted also a lot. And with this, I think we're perfectly on time. So to thank you all, everyone who attended, to thank you in special the speakers in the different working groups, and primarily Olivier, Deepa, and Chiro for your fantastic moderation. We know it's a challenge, it's not an easy task to do, but you've done a wonderful job, and we will continue to be in touch with you. We thank you all again, and stay safe and stay connected with the VEF news up to the September conference. Thank you so much, and have a nice evening for all of you.